Hey guys, sorry this is a little late coming out, but I really need to talk about the House of the Dragon, Fire and Blood, the blood and cheese scene. Let's go. So there's been a lot of controversy and discussion about a scene in episode 1, season 2 of House and the Dragon, and it's called the blood and cheese scene. Cheese is the nickname for the rat catcher in the scene, who is... I give a spoiler warning, but this is the first episode. The third one's about to come out tonight. And it's in the first episode. It's kind of like not a surprise. There's foreshadowing all episode long. There's a lot of the rat catcher in the background. So it's a revenge scene. It's extremely mature, this whole series, okay? So I'm not going to trigger warn everything, but trigger warning for a lot of violence, sometimes towards children, descriptions of blood, you name it, okay? Be responsible for your own triggers. This might not be the show for you. That being said, it's a revenge scene. A child was killed, and instead of people being able to talk to each other, they decide to kill another child in revenge. There's so much more to say about it, but a couple of reasons why it was controversial, not for the obvious reasons, but in the book Fire and Blood, this scene was actually even more disturbing, and it's one of the most brutal scenes in this world of Ice and Fire. I think. I don't think it's the most brutal scene, but I think part of that has to do with the lack of description about it in here. It just hits you with the hardest stuff, but it's not a whole scene necessarily written in here. Fire and Blood is the part 1 of the Targaryen story. Okay, one family in Westeros, this fake world, that they're dragon riders. And to me, that makes them basically the most interesting. There's a ton of families fighting for power, and it's been going on for, hundreds of years. Since the very first Targaryen came to this continent and basically took it over, because dragons are like the nuclear weapons of the medieval world in this world. We have, though, there's a picture of Vhagar and Lucerys on Arax was his dragon, I believe. So we got that picture of the dragon fight, right? The next page, page 424, and the next page, 425, that's the whole scene. That's it. You can count it as 2 pages, or it would be 1 page front and back. The next page has like the aftermath of that, which we haven't completely seen yet, including what happens to Queen Helena, who was the mother. Now, I was wrong in my remembering this story when I was narrating in the live stream. I thought Helena had to choose between the twins, the girl and the boy. There was a whole other boy in this family that I forgot about because it's so brief. Look at the thickness of this book. Blood and Cheese happens in 2 pages. Let's call it 2 pages. I don't know if... This is going to make no sense to you if you haven't watched the show, I'm sorry, but I'm just going to use the lingo, okay? I don't know if Daemon actually went into King's Landing for this. At the bottom of the page before it, Daemon says, Lucerys will be avenged, an eye for an eye, a son for a son, okay? So there's like a teensy little bit at the bottom after that. In his youth, Daemon Targaryen had been the prince of the city, his face and laugh familiar to every cut-purse, whore, and gambler in Flea Bottom. Okay, the prince still had friends in the low places of King's Landing and followers amongst the Goldcloaks. That supports the idea that he went to King's Landing himself, found a Goldcloak, and convinced them to do the deed. It doesn't say specifically that he went, though, because this is the deal with Fire and Blood. It's supposed to be a history book written by someone who wasn't there. These are I have a video about who was telling this story. There's like 3 or 4 people contributing to this history as far as the book says. So we get often several versions, and then it'll say like, but that wasn't likely, or but we'll never know, or something like that. So the show has a couple sentences about what might have happened, and then it has to fill in the blanks and like make an actual narrative from it. Whereas Game of Thrones, this is a whole series, only the first book is called Game of Thrones. The first episode of Game of Thrones, which ends with the attempted death of a child, is 85 pages. That's the first episode of Game of Thrones, 85 pages. We get 2 in here. That's the difference. This has every movement, every word, every description. That's how the entire series is written. And these take place 170-ish years after the current spot in Fire and Blood that is occurring. All right, so they just had a couple of sentences about it. I don't think legally I'm allowed to read the entire scene. He had allies at court as well, even on the Green Council, which was Alicent's crew. And one other go-between, a special friend he trusted utterly, who knew the wine sinks and rat pits that blah blah blah, okay? And moved easily through the shadows of the city. They're talking about Mysaria, the White Worm. Now, she was a captive in the show. I don't know that actually happened, but I was wrong about stuff before, because the visual like build up to these scenes isn't in this book. I get a couple sentences that I read last year. I'm also trying not to get too ahead of myself. I'm trying to like kind of keep pace with how the show is going so that it's fresher in my mind, but I watched it and then read it, so I forgot about Helena's third child. Amidst the stews of Fleabottom, Prince Daemon's go-between found suitable instruments. Okay, one had been a sergeant in the city watch, big and brutal. I'm not going to tell you why he lost the gold cloak, because it's gross. The other was a rat catcher in the Red Keep. Their true names are lost to history. They are remembered as Blood and Cheese. Okay, so Blood was the big brute with the deep voice in the show, and Cheese was the rat catcher. Rats will eat anything. I don't know that they're particularly fond of cheese. I've raised rats before, but anyway. It doesn't say that Daemon went to King's Landing and found these people. It actually hints that Mysaria went to King's Landing and found these people, when in the show it seemed more like Mysaria just told him about them. Daemon going to King's Landing was pretty darn risky, in my opinion. They talk a little bit about the tunnels. Cheese led Blood into the heart of the castle, unseen by any guard, which in the show, it's like they could have been caught like 8 times, and it's not just Kristen Cole's fault. Some say their quarry was the king himself, but Aegon was accompanied by Kingsguard wherever he went, and even Cheese knew no way in and out of Maegor's holdfast, which they have a conversation about in the show, where it's like, I don't know the way up, anymore, or to this other place where the king might. The king was in the throne room, though. I think they passed him. I don't know. There was like a little conflict about like, oh, I don't know the way any further out. Like, we can't find who Daemon told them to find. So they didn't go to Maegor's holdfast. The Tower of the Hand was less secure. They crept up through the walls, bypassing the spearmen posted at the tower doors. Sir Otto's rooms were of no interest to them. This is a major change. Instead, they slipped into his daughter's chambers 1 floor below. Queen Alicent's chambers. She was by herself. The whole Kristen Cole thing, it may be hinted at some point in here, but as far as I know, it didn't exist. And from the other YouTube videos I've watched about this, it didn't exist. That's fine. There's plenty of room to have that be open-ended. Instead, they slipped into his daughter's chambers 1 floor below. Queen Alicent had taken up residence there after King Viserys died. Aegon moved to Maegor's holdfast with Helaena, but they found Queen Alicent's room. Cheese bound and gagged the Dowager Queen, while Blood killed her bedmate. The girl that they just come across, that's like a servant girl, they actually kill her in here, which I'm surprised they didn't do in the show, because that would be kind of on par with what the show does. Then they settled down to wait, for they knew it was the custom of Queen Helena to bring her children to see her grandmother. Grandmother? Alicent, Helena, and then the Helena's children. Yeah, it is a grandmother. All right, so she brought her children to see Alicent every evening before bed. So they were lying in wait. They didn't just happen across Helena with no guards, anything, okay? They grabbed Alicent and then waited until Helena came of her own accord, is how the book goes. We're all the way down the first page, okay? That's the first page of it, other than like a couple sentences right here about Daemon. That's it, right? There was a lot of other stuff that happened in that episode too, but it kind of, some of it they had to draw forward so that it made sense later on. I thought it was brilliant, actually. So this is the rough part, okay? Blind to her danger, the queen appeared at dusk. Well, as dusk was settling, accompanied by her 3 children. Jaehaerys and Jaehaera were the twins, brother and sister. They were 6. And a younger son named Maelor, who was 2. Helena was holding his little hand and calling out her mother's name, so Alicent's name. Blood barred the door and slew the queen's guardsmen. She did have guards. That makes sense. While Cheese appeared to snatch up Maelor, who was the 2-year-old. Scream and you all will die, Blood said. Helena kept her calm and said, who are you? And they said, debt collectors, an eye for an eye, a son for a son. It's by far probably the most well-known phrase of this entire situation here. We only want the one to square things. Won't hurt the rest of your fine folks, not one little hair. Which one you want to lose, your grace? Right. When she figured out they meant one of her kids, she pleaded with the men to kill her instead. We were all expecting that to happen, instead of her trying to trade a necklace. Like, she thought clearly that, like, they were there to, like, get something valuable, so she said, I have a necklace. They just took it anyway. Helena in the show is suspected to be on the autism spectrum. As someone who's worked with many, many autistic children, I agree, and I think she actually portrayed it very accurately. There's a lot of different severities of autism or autism spectrum disorder. I don't know how to explain it. The shock she went into is normal for, anybody, but the way she's kind of not quite understanding the social situations, the way she felt about the ensuing procession, just the types of reactions she has, and the kind of, I don't want to say it's antisocial behavior, but it's not exactly normal social behavior, all points to a support of the theory that she may be autistic. And I think this actually makes a lot of sense and is a perfect way of showing inclusion without throwing it in our faces, because sometimes it's like, lately I feel like shows will break the fourth wall and be like, she's got autism, we've got one of those. I hate that. I hate that. Just show these characters being in situations, and I think we should have a lot of compassion for Helena regardless. The actress is just phenomenal, the way that she was acting with her face. All of that is a tangent from, she offered a necklace in the show, she offered her life in the books, and I think everybody was expecting that. I don't know why that stuck out as such a jarring difference. I guess because it was that kind of, it almost seemed like a lack of emotional attachment, but that makes perfect sense with the autism theory. Again, I have an education degree where we took special ed classes, and then I actually taught in the schools for about 8 years, mostly in special ed, pre-K to high school. A lot of them in the, there's different versions of like special education types, but anyway. So I'm not just saying that because other people are saying that. I'm saying that because I recognize some of these symptoms in her, in this character. But they said a wife's not a son. They're looking for a son for a son. Also, you notice Daemon in the book didn't specifically say Aemond. Yeah, he didn't specifically say Aemond in here. He just said son for a son. would have been more just if Aemon had been the one to be killed, because he's the one that killed the other kid. But they ended up finding Alicent, knowing, I don't know how they knew that Helena was coming there, but she did. They had already killed her handmaiden and locked the door. "A wife's not a son," said Blood. "It has to be a boy." They threatened more harm to the little girl. Remember, she was the only girl. She was 6, and there were 2 boys, her twin and Maelor, the 2-year-old. I'm not going to say what they threatened to do to her, but you can probably imagine. They said, "Pick or we will kill them all." On her knees, weeping, Helena named her youngest Maelor. Perhaps because she thought the boy was too young to understand. Perhaps it was because the older boy, Jaehaerys, was Aegon's firstborn son and the heir to the throne. Okay? There's a movie and book called Sophie's Choice where there was a very famous pick which child gets killed scene. Sorry for spoilers, but that movie it's famous. It was pretty good. The book is gross, just really perverted and gross, and I didn't enjoy it, but a lot of people are talking about the similarities between this choice and the Sophie's Choice situation. You hear that little boy, Cheese, whispered to Maelor, the 2-year-old. 2-year-olds are somewhat verbal, usually, so they could probably understand some of this. "Your mama wants you dead." Then he gave Blood a grin, and the hulking swordsman slew Prince Jaehaerys, striking off the boy's head with a single blow, and the queen began to scream. Decapitation theme, same. Method of it, different. Helena did not scream in the show. She grabbed her child and exited the room while they were struggling to decapitate the other one. Her face just said it all, though. She was in complete shock. It looked like she still didn't really understand what was going on fully, at least yet. So the other thing people were kind of complaining about was, like, she didn't even scream. Like, why wouldn't she? Yeah, that's an obvious reaction, but it's not the only reaction. I mean, maybe she thought it would draw more attention to her daughter. She was trying to exit, with them, but there were 3 kids in the book here. Strange to say, the Ratcatcher and the Butcher were true to their word. They did no further harm to Queen Helena and her surviving children, but rather fled with the prince's head in hand. So I guess they just took the head. Sorry. This is really gross. A cry went up, but Cheese knew the secret passageways and the guards did not, so the killers made their escape. This is exact, though. 2 days later, Blood was seized at the Gate of the Gods, trying to leave King's Landing with the head. Under torture, he confessed that he had been taking it to Harrenhal to collect his reward from Prince Daemon. That's a whole other thing. Daemon was supposed to be at Harrenhal this entire time. Like, he was supposed to be in Harrenhal when that dragon attack happened. So he keeps talking about it in season 2, that he's about to go. So he will. But that was another thing that led us to believe that he couldn't have been in King's Landing coordinating this if he was in Harrenhal. But he's a dragon. He could fly between the 2. Somehow. I don't know. I don't know how far away those are, but I think they're pretty far. He also gave up a description of the whore he claimed had hired them, an older woman, foreign by her talk, cloaked and hooded, very pale. The other harlots called her Misery. That's also Mysaria. I guess she would be an older woman by now. They give her more to do, I think, in the show. But basically, the guy implicated Prince Daemon, talked about Mysaria, although I don't know if he actually ever did talk to her in the show. So all of these things are connected. After 13 days of torment, Blood was at last allowed to die. They don't talk about Aegon inflicting anything, but he was really angry in the show, and I think that makes sense. But it took him a while to die. Alicent wanted revenge and asked Larys Clubfoot for their names, but we don't know if it happened according to this book. Looked at every woman to try to find Misery or the White Worm or Mysaria. In his grief and fury, King Aegon II commanded that all the city's ratcatchers be taken out and hanged, and this was done. Sir Otto Hightower brought 100 cats into the Red Keep to take their place. The last paragraph is about what happened to Helaena and Aegon to some extent. So they had 2 pages to go on. And I think, you know, the events of the actual scene with Helaena are more graphic and horrible in here. The end result is the same, and the end result is just as horrific as you can imagine. There was a choice, but House of the Dragon is missing some children. They do finally talk about Daemon, I don't know how they're going to say his name. There was a 4th child between Alicent and Viserys who was in the books, and this wasn't in the show. He wasn't in King's Landing. You think they would have mentioned a 4th kid? There was a big thing about that. But Maelor, it's probably coming. Like, you know, they probably just haven't had him yet or something. And they made it between the 2 twins, which that was pretty graphic too, the way they were like describing it. I don't know. I don't think they needed to deviate that far. I understand why they didn't want it in Alicent's chambers because she was getting it on with Kristen Cole, but that's clearly not in 2 pages, guys. 2 pages, that's it. So of course they have to elaborate. I had another video about this, but because I was doing these little like differences videos last time because I just wanted an easy way for me to look up and be like, what actually happened there? Last season was this many pages. The whole season, okay? What was it? Page 352 to 422 approximately. So not even 100 pages for the whole season, whereas 85 pages of this was episode 1 of Game of Thrones, and that went on for 8 seasons. So this is bare bones stuff here. There's possibilities. There's possibilities. George R.R. Martin probably had a lot of different ideas and didn't have time to write another series as dense as Game of Thrones. So, he just got the bare bones stuff in here, which is fine. It's fine. We have something to go on, and it's very, very interesting. Aegon's Conquest is also in here. Some of the Blackfire Rebellions, I believe, are in here. But honestly, I'm just going to say there's not as many dragons. I don't really care as much. I mean, the dragons is like the most interesting part to me. I thought about this earlier, like, would I care about this show if there weren't dragons in it? And I'd watch it, but I don't know if it would be as interesting, just to be completely honest. The only other source, I do think there's one other book that I don't have, but I forget what it is or what it's about. I think it's like an illustrated version of this or something, so it's a similar thing. But the only other source I have that mentions Blood and Cheese is this larger book, World of Ice and Fire, which goes through more history than Fire and Blood because it's even more abbreviated. It's beautiful. I mean, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous book. But we get page 74 from here to here about Blood and Cheese. So yeah, there's stuff in here, but it's very, very scant. Eye for an eye, son for a son. Lucerys will be avenged in the book. He was the prince of the city, and he still had many friends in the stews and brothels of King's Landing. Chief of them was his once paramour, Mysaria, the White Worm. So they directly say it was Mysaria in here. They kind of hint at it in there, call her different things. Okay? She arranged his vengeance in this book. She arranged his vengeance, hiring a brute and a rat catcher known to history as Blood and Cheese. They knew all the secrets of Maegor's tunnels. Oh, this doesn't even talk about Alicent. Slipping into the Red Keep Blood and Cheese seized hold of Queen Helena and her children, and then offered her a brutal choice, which of her sons would die. In the end, she named Maelor the youngest, and deemed too young to understand. Blood and Cheese killed Prince Jaehaerys instead, as his mother screamed her horror. Then they fled with the prince's head, true to their word that they were only after one of Aegon's sons. Actually, that was it. That was it. That's all this says. And it's a little bit contradictory to the other one. So that's the information we're going on, and that's it. There's a lot of plotting and, twisty stories that are going on in the background with these books. But I don't know, you be the judge of, which one was worse, considering we only had this information given to write this scene from, the whole episode from. I think some of the show choices were a little dumb, like not having enough guards there, but it happened anyway in the books. It was gonna happen regardless. I do think they could have dramatized it a little more, but at the same time, like, she didn't scream, she didn't call out for help, she just kind of silently left. But those are understandable reactions as well, especially if your captors are occupied for you to escape. And she didn't want to just escape herself. She grabbed her child and slipped out. If she had screamed, maybe they would have turned around and hurt her too. I don't, even though that wasn't their task. So people say it's underwhelming because it was a little less graphic, I think. And since we didn't have much to go on, I think imaginations run a little more amok and create, possible scenarios. So I don't find it disappointing. I think it was a little underwhelming as far as what we expected, but I think they did a good job. And I think the actress, I forget how to say her name, who plays Helena, did an amazing job. And I think the writers overall on that episode did an amazing job. So yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. That's all we've got. And it's not much. So it happened according to some of this material. Other things were changed or embellished on, but the end result is poor Helena had this horrible, horrible choice before her, and there was no right answer, right? I mean, it's poor woman who already has these dragon dreams, and we don't know if she could foresee this. I mean, she seemed to in the show. Yeah, that's my little summary of Blood and Cheese. Let me know what you think. And I didn't read the book word for word on purpose because copyright, so I kind of summarized or changed a little bit of it, but a lot of what I read was direct quotes. Yep. So this is what we've got. Let me know what you think. I can't wait to watch the third episode tonight. I'm sad that there's only 8 of them, but they're gonna get crazier and crazier and more and more and more action-packed. So, whew. So far I still feel like the dragons are a little janky looking, like not as good as Game of Thrones, and I don't understand, like, why can't they just have the same production? I'm sure they have less money or something, but anyway, there's more of them. But I'm here for the dragons. So, talk to you again. I'm having a couple other topics that I want to record about, so subscribe if you'd like to see more of these. I'm probably going to post these as a bonus video on Saturdays. I think that's what I did before. We're ardent animals here. Dragons aren't real, so I can't really put it in the animal category. It is art. It's a book. It's a book. It's art. But it's a little departure from what I normally do, although it's my channel, I can do what I want. That's the good thing about it. So, alright, I've been signing this off for like 7 minutes, so talk to you in the next one. Drop a comment below, click subscribe, all those things that I'm supposed to ask you to do, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye! So there's been a lot of controversy over a scene in season 1. Sorry, I'm not gonna trigger throwing in our face. What did I say? Names are hard, guys, but I understand why he wrote them that way. The cat was King Ungum's king. 2 yards, 2. But her face just shed it. I can't wait to. I don't know what I'm doing.